How about I start again, but with some volume? That might be better, and we might attract some attention. There we go. Hopefully, chapter 4. No iron bars, a cage. The granite walls of Egdon Heath penal settlement are visible when there is no mist from the main road, and it is not uncommon for cars to stop there for a few moments while the occupants stand up and stare happily about them. They are looking for convicts, and as often as not they are rewarded by seeing move across the heath before them a black group of men chained together and uniformly dressed, with a mounted and armed warder riding at their side. They give an appearance of industry, which on investigation is quite illusory. For so much of the day at Egdon is taken up with marching to and from the quarries, in issuing and counting tools, in guarding and chaining and releasing the workmen, that there is very little work done. But there is usually something to be seen from the road. Enough, anyway, to be imagined from the very aspect of the building, to send the trippers off to their teas with their consciences agreeably unquiet at the memory of small dishonesties in railway trains, inaccurate income tax returns, and the 101 minor infractions of the law that are inevitable in civilized life. Paul arrived from Blackstone late one afternoon in early autumn, with 2 warders and 6 other long-sentence prisoners. The journey had been spent in an ordinary third-class railway carriage, where the 2 warders smoked black tobacco in cheap little wooden pipes and were inclined toward conversation. "You'll find a lot of improvements since you were here last," said one of them. "There's 2 coloured glass windows in the chapel, presented by the last governor's widow. Lovely they are, St. Peter and St. Paul, in prison, being released by an angel. Some of the low church prisoners don't like them, though. We had a lecture last week, too, but it wasn't very popular. The work of the League of Nations, given by a young chap of the name of Potts. Still, it makes a change. I hear you've been having a lot of changes at Blackstone." "I should just about think we have," said one of the convicts, and proceeded to give a somewhat exaggerated account of the death of Mr. Prendergast. Presently one of the warders, observing that Paul seemed shy of joining the conversation, handed him a daily paper. "Like to look at this, Sonny?" he said. "It's the last you'll see for some time." There was very little in it to interest Paul, whose only information from the outside world during the last 6 weeks had come from Sir Wilfrid Lucas Dockery's weekly bulletins. For one of the first discoveries of his captivity was that interest in news does not spring from genuine curiosity, but from the desire for completeness. During his long years of freedom, he had scarcely allowed a day to pass without reading a fairly fully at least 2 newspapers, always pressing on with a series of events which never came to an end. Once the series was broken, he had little desire to resume it. But he was deeply moved to discover on one of the middle pages an obscure but recognizable photograph of Margot and Peter. "The Honourable Mrs. Beast Chetwynd," it said below, "and her son Peter, who succeeds his uncle as Earl of Passmaster." In the next column was an announcement of the death of Lord Passmaster, and a brief survey of his uneventful life. At the end it said, "It is understood that Mrs. Beast Chetwynd and the young Earl, who have been spending the last few months at their villa in Corfu, will return to England in a few days. Mrs. Beast Chetwynd has for many years been a prominent hostess in the fashionable world and is regarded as one of the most beautiful women in society. Her son's succession to the earldom recalls the sensation caused in May of this year by the announcement of engagement to Mr. Paul Pennyfeather and the dramatic arrest of the bridegroom at a leading West End hotel a few hours before the wedding ceremony. The new Lord Passmaster is 16 years old and has, up till now, been educated privately." Paul sat back in the carriage for a long time, looking at the photograph, while his companions played several hands of poker in reckless disregard of standing orders. In his 6 weeks of solitude and grave consideration, he had failed to make up his mind about Margot Beast Chetwynd. It was torn and distracted by 2 conflicting methods of thought. On one side was the dead weight of precept, inherited from generations of schoolmasters and divines. According to these, the problem was difficult but not insoluble. He had done the right thing in shielding the woman. So much was clear, but Margot had not quite filled the place assigned to her, for in this case she was grossly culpable. And he was shielding her, not from misfortune nor injustice, but from the consequence of her crimes. He felt a flush about his knees as a Boy Scout honour whispered that Margot had got him into a row and ought jolly well to own up and face the music. As he sat over his postbags, he had wrestled with this argument, without achieving any satisfactory result except a growing conviction that there was something radically inapplicable about this whole code of ready-made honour that is the still small voice, trained to command, of Englishmen all over the world. On the other hand, was the undeniable cogency of Peter Beast Chetwynd's "You can't see Mama in prison, can you?" The more Paul considered this, the more he perceived it to be the statement of a natural law. He appreciated the assumption of comprehension with which Peter had delivered it. As he studied Margot's photograph, dubiously transmitted as it was, he was strengthened in his belief that there was, in fact, and should be, one law for her and another for himself, and that the raw little exertions of 19th century radicals were essentially base and trivial and misdirected. It was not simply that Margot had been very rich or that he had been in love with her. It was just that he saw the impossibility of Margaret in prison. The bare connection of vocables associating the ideas was obscene. Margot dressed in prison uniform, hustled down corridors by wardesses, all like the younger Miss Fagin, visited by philanthropic old ladies with devotional pamphlets, set to work in the laundry washing the other prisoners' clothes. These things were impossible, and if the preposterous processes of law had condemned her, then the woman that they actually caught and pinned down would not have been Margot, but some quite other person of the same name and somewhat similar appearance. It was impossible to imprison the Margot who had committed the crime. If someone had to suffer that the public might be discouraged from providing poor Mrs. Grimes with the only employment for which civilization had preferred her, then it had better be Paul than that other woman with Margot's name. For anyone who has been put to an English public school will always feel comparatively at home in prison. It is the people brought up in the gay intimacy of the slums, Paul learned, who find prison so soul-destroying. How lovely Margot was, Paul reflected. Even in this absurd photograph, this grey and black smudge of ink, even the most hardened criminal there, he was serving his third sentence for blackmail, laid down his cards for a moment and remarked upon how the whole carriage seemed to be flooded with the delectable savoir of the Champs-Élysées in early June. "Funny," he said. "I thought I smelt scent." And that set them off talking about women. Paul found another old friend at Egdon Heath Prison, a short, thick-set, cheerful figure who stumped along out in front of them on the way to chapel, making a good deal noise with an artificial leg. "Here are again, old boy," he remarked during one of the responses. "I'm in the soup, as per usual." "Didn't you like the job?" Paul asked. "Top hole," said Grimes. "But the hell of the thing happened. I'll tell you later." That morning, complete with pickaxes, field telephone, and 2 armed and mounted warders, Paul and a little squad of fellow criminals were led to the quarries. Grimes was in the party. "I've been here a fortnight," said Grimes, as soon as they got an opportunity of talking, "and it seems too long already. I've always been a sociable chap, and I don't like it. 3 years is too long, old boy. Still, we'll have God's own Beano when I get out. I've been thinking about that day and night." "I suppose it was bigamy," said Paul. "The same. I ought to have stayed abroad. I was arrested as soon as I landed. You see, Mrs. Grimes turned up at the shop, so Off Grimes went. There are various sorts of hell, but that young woman can beat up a pretty lively one of her own. A warder passed them by, and they moved apart, banging industriously at the sandstone cliff before them. "I'm not sure it was worth it, though," said Grimes, to see poor old Flossie in the box and my sometime father-in-law. "I hear the old man's shut down the school. Grimes gave the place a bad name. See anything of Prendy ever?" "He was murdered the other day." "Poor Prendy. He wasn't cut out for the happy life, was he? Do you know, I think I shall give up schoolmastering for good when I get out. It doesn't lead anywhere. Seems to have led us both to the same place." "Yes, rather a coincidence, isn't it? Damn, here's that policeman again." Soon they were marched back to prison. Except for the work in the quarries, life at Egdon was almost the same as at Blackstone. Slops outside, chapel, privacy. After a week, however, Paul became conscious of an alien influence at work. His first intimation of this came from the chaplain. "Your library books," he said one day, popping cheerfully into Paul's cell and handing him 2 new novels still in their wrappers, and bearing inside them the label of a Piccadilly bookseller. "If you don't like them, I have several for you to choose from." He showed him, rather coyly, a pile of barely bound volumes he carried under his arm. "I thought you'd like the new Virginia Woolf. It's only been out 2 days. "Thank you, sir," said Paul politely. Clearly the library of the new prison was run on a much more enterprising and extravagant plan than at Blackstone. "Or there's this book on theatrical design," said the chaplain, showing him a large illustrated volume that would hardly have cost less than 3 guineas. "Perhaps we might stretch a point and give you that as well as your educational work." "Well, thank you, sir," said Paul. "Let me know if you want to change," said the chaplain. "And by the way, you're allowed to write a letter now, you know. If, by any chance, you're writing to Mrs. Beast Chetwynd, do mention that you think the library good. She's presenting a new pulpit in the chapel in carved alabaster," he added irrelevantly, and popped out again to give Grimes a copy of Smiles' Self-Help, out of which some unreceptive reader in the remote past had torn the last 108 pages. "People may think as they like about well-thumbed favourites," said Paul, "but there is something incomparably thrilling in the first opening of a brand-new book. Why should the chaplain want me to mention the library to Margot?" he wondered. That evening at supper, Paul noticed without surprise that there were several small pieces of coal in his dripping. That kind of thing did happen now and then, but he was somewhat disconcerted when he attempted to scrape them out to find that they were quite soft. Prison food was rather odd often. It was a mistake to complain, but still, he examined the dripping more closely. It had a pinkish tinge that should not have been there, and was unusually firm and sticky under his knife. He tasted it dubiously. It was pâté de foie gras. From then onwards there was seldom a day on which some small meteorite of this kind did not mysteriously fall from the outside world. One day he returned from the heath to find his cell heavy with scent in the half-dark, for the lights were rarely lit until some time after sundown, and the window was very small. His table was filled with a large bunch of winter roses, which had cost 3 shillings each that morning in Bond Street. Prisoners at Egdon are allowed to keep flowers in their cell, and often risk severe reprimand by stooping to pick pimpernels and periwinkles on their way from work. On another occasion, the prison doctor, trotting on his daily round of inspection, paused at Paul's cell, examined his name on the card hanging inside his door, looked hard at him and said, "You need a tonic." He trotted on without more ado, but the next day a huge medicine bottle was placed in Paul's cell. "You're to take 2 glasses with each meal," said the warder, "and I hopes you like it." Paul could not quite decide whether the warder's tone was friendly or not, but he liked the medicine, for it was brown sherry. On another occasion, great indignation was aroused in the cell next door to him, whose occupant, an aged burglar, was inadvertently given Paul's ration of caviar. He was speedily appeased by the substitution for it of an unusually large lump of cold bacon, but not before the warder in charge had suffered considerable alarm at the possibility of complaint to the governor. "I'm not one to make a fuss usually," said the old burglar, "but I will be treated fair. Why, you only had to look at the stuff they gave me to see it was bad, let alone taste it. And on bacon night, too. You take my tip," he said to Paul as they found themselves alone in the quarries one day. "And keep your eyes open. You're a new one, and they might easily try to put a thing like that over on you. Don't eat it. That's putting you in the wrong. Keep it. Show it to the governor. They ain't got no right to try on a thing like that, and they knows it." Presently, a letter from Margot came. It was not a long one. "Darling Paul," it said, "it has been so difficult writing to you because, I never can write letters, and it's so particularly hard with you because the policemen read it and cross it all out if they don't like it, and I can't really think of anything they will like. Peter and I are back at King's Thursday. It was a divine at Corfu, except for an English doctor who was a bore and would call so often. Do you know, I don't really like this house terribly, and I'm having it redone. Do you mind? Peter has become an earl, did you know? And is rather sweet about it and very self-conscious, which you wouldn't expect really, would you, knowing Peter? I'm going to come and see you sometime, may I? When I can get away, but Bobby P's death has made such a lot of things to see you. I do hope you're getting enough food and books and things, or will they cross that out? Love, Margot. I was cut by Lady Circumference, my dear, at Newmarket, a real point-blank Tranby Croft cut. Poor Maltravers says if I'm not careful I shall find myself socially ostracised. Don't you think that will be marvellous? I may be wrong, but, do you know, I rather believe poor little Alistair Trumpington's going to fall in love with me. What shall I do? Eventually, Margot came herself. It was the first time they had met since the morning in June when she had sent him off to rescue her distressed protégés in Marseille. The meeting took place in a small room set aside for visitors. Margot sat at one end of the table and Paul at the other, with the warder in between them. "I must ask you to put your hands on the table in front of you," said the warder. "Like up, Jenkins," said Margot faintly, laying out her exquisitely manicured hand with the gloves beside her bag. Paul for the first time noticed how coarse and ill-kept his hands had become. For a moment, neither spoke. "Do I look awful?" Paul said at last. "I haven't seen a looking-glass for some time." "Well, perhaps just a little mal soigné, darling. Don't they let you shave at all?" "No discussion of the prison regime is permitted. Prisoners are allowed to make plain statement of their state of health, but must on no account make complaints or comments on the general condition." "Oh dear," said Margaret, "this is going to be very difficult. What are we to say to each other? I'm almost sorry I came. You are glad I came, aren't you?" "Don't mind me, mum, if you wants to talk personal," said the warder kindly. "I only has to stop conspiracy. Nothing I hear ever goes any further, and I hears a good deal, I can tell you. They carry on awful, some women, what with crying and fainting and hysterics generally. Why, one of them," he said with relish, "had an epileptic fit not long ago." "I think it's more likely that I shall have a fit," said Margot. "I've never felt so shy in my life, Paul. Do say something, please." "How's Alistair?" said Paul. "Rather sweet, really. He's always at King's Thursday now. I like him." Another pause. "Do you know," said Margot, "it's an odd thing, but I do believe that after all these years I'm beginning to be regarded as no longer a respectable woman. I told you when I wrote, didn't I, that Lady Circumference cut me the other day. Of course, she's just a thoroughly bad-mannered old woman, but there have been a whole lot of things rather like that lately. Don't you think it's rather awful?" "You won't mind much, will you?" said Paul. "They're awful bores, anyway." "Yes, but I don't like them dropping me, of course. I don't really mind, but I think it's a pity, particularly for Peter. It's not just Lady Circumference, but Lady Vanbrugh and Fanny Simpleforth and the Stales and all those people. It's a pity it should happen just when Peter's beginning to be a little class-conscious, anyway." It'll give him all the wrong ideas, don't you think? How's business? Asked Paul abruptly. Paul, you mustn't be nasty to me, said Margot in a low voice. I don't think you'd say that if you knew quite how I was feeling. I'm sorry, Margot. As a matter of fact, I just wanted to know. I'm selling out. A Swiss firm was making things difficult, but I don't think that business has anything to do with the ostracism, as Maltravers would say. I believe it's all because I'm beginning to grow old. I've never heard anything so ridiculous. Why, all those people are about 80 anyway. You aren't at all. I was afraid you wouldn't understand, said Margot, and there was another pause. 10 more minutes, said the warder. Things haven't turned out quite as we expected them to, have they? Said Margot. They talked about some parties Margot had been to and the books Paul was reading. At last Margot said, Paul, I'm going. I simply can't stand another moment of this. It was nice of you to come, said Paul. I've decided something rather important, said Margot. Just this minute. I'm going to be married quite soon to Maltravers. I'm sorry, but I am. I suppose it's because I look so awful, said Paul. No, it's just everything. It's that too, in a way, but not the way you mean. Paul, it's simply something that's going to happen. Do you understand at all, dear? It may help you, too, in a way. I don't want to think that there's the reason either. It's just how things are going to happen. Oh dear, how difficult it is to say anything. If you should want to kiss goodbye, said the jailer. Not being husband and wife, it's not usual. Still, I don't mind stretching a point for once. Oh, what? Said Margaret and left the room without looking back. Paul returned to his cell. His supper had already been served out to him, a small pie, from which protruded the feet of 2 pigeons. There was even a table napkin wrapped round it. But Paul had very little appetite, for he was greatly pained at how little he was pained by the events of that afternoon. Chapter 5. The Passing of a Public Schoolman. A day or two later, Paul again found himself next to Grimes in the quarry. When the warder was out of earshot, Grimes said, Oh, boy, I can't stand this much longer. I just ain't good enough. I don't see any way out, said Paul. Anyway, it's quite bearable. I'd as soon be here than Llanabber. Not so, Grimes, said Grimes. He just languishes in captivity like the lark. It's all right for you. You like reading and thinking and all that. Well, I'm different, you know. I like the drink and a bit of fun, and chatting now and then to my pals. I'm a sociable chap. It's turning me into a giddy machine, this life. And there's an awful chaplain who gives me the nip, who keeps butting in a breezy way and asking if I feel all right with God. Of course I'm not, and I tell him so. Can't stand most sorts of misfortune, old boy, but I can't stand repression. That was what broke me up at Llanabber. That's what's going to break me up here, if I don't look out for myself. It seems to me it's time for Grimes flitted off to another crime. No one has ever succeeded in escaping from this prison, said Paul. Well, just you watch Grimes next time there's a fog. As luck would have it, there was a fog the next day, a heavy, impenetrable white mist, which came up quite suddenly while they're at work, enveloping men and quarry in the way that mists do on Egdon Heath. Close up there, said the warder in charge. Stop work and close up. Look out there, you idiots. For Grimes had stumbled over the field telephone. If you've broken it, you'll come up before the governor tomorrow. Hold this horse, said the other warder, handing the reins to Grimes. He stooped and began to collect the chains on which the men were strung for their march home. Grimes seemed to be having some difficulty with the horse, which was plunging and roaring further away from the squad. Can't you even hold a horse? Said the warder. Suddenly, Grimes, with remarkable agility considering his leg, was seen to be in the saddle riding away into the heath. Come back, roared the warder. Come back or I'll fire. He put his rifle on his shoulder and fired into the fog. He'll come back all right, he said. No one ever gets away for long. You'll get solitary confinement and #1 diet for this, poor fish. No one seemed to be too much disturbed by the incident. Even when it was found out the field telephone was disconnected. "He has no hope," said the warder. "They often do that, just put down their tools, sudden, and cut and run. But they can't get away in those clothes with no money. We shall warn all the farms tonight. Sometimes they stays out hiding for several days, but back they comes when they're hungry, or else they'll get arrested the moment they show up in a village. I reckon it just makes them try it." That evening, the horse came back, but there was no sign of Grimes. Special patrols were sent out with the bloodhounds, reining at their leashes. The farms and villages on the heath were warned, and the anxious inhabitants barred their doors. Mostly and more pertinently forbade their children to leave the house on any pretext whatsoever. The roads were watched for miles, and all cars were stopped and searched, to the intense annoyance of the many law-abiding citizens. But Grimes did not turn up. Bets were slyly made amongst the prisoners as to the day of his recovery, but days passed, and rations of bread changed hands, but there was still no Grimes. A week later at morning service, the chaplain prayed for his soul. The governor crossed his name off the body receipt book and notified the Home Secretary, the Right Honourable Sir Humphrey Maltravers, that Grimes was dead. "I'm afraid it was a terrible end," said the chaplain to Paul. "Did they find the body?" "No, that was the worst thing about it. The hounds followed his scent as far as Egdenmire. Then it ended. The shepherd who knows the paths through the fog found his hat floating on the surface of the most treacherous part. I'm afraid there is no doubt that he died a very horrible death in that bog." "Poor old Grimes," said Paul. "And he was an old Harrovian, too." But later, thinking things over as he ate peacefully by one of the oysters that had been provided as a relish for his supper, Paul knew that Grimes was not dead. Lord Tangent was dead. Mr. Prendergast was dead. The time would even come for Paul Pennyfeather, but Grimes, Paul at last realized, was of the immortals. He was a life force. Sentenced to death in Flanders, he popped up in Wales. Drowned in Wales, he emerged in South America. Engulfed in the dark mystery of Egdenmire, he would rise again at some time, somewhere, shaking from his limbs the musty integuments of the tomb. Surely he had been followed in the backyard train of distant Arcadia, and played on the reeds of myth by forgotten streams, and taught the childish satires the art of love. Had he not suffered unscathed the fearful dooms of all the offended gods, of all the histories, fire and brimstone, yawning earthquakes, plague and pestilence? Had he not stood like the Pompeian sentry while the citadel of the plain fell to ruin about his ears? Had he not, like some grease-caked canal swimmer, breasted the waves of the deluge? Had he not moved unseen when the darkness covered the waters? "I often wonder whether I'm to blame in this matter," said the chaplain. "It's awful to think of someone under my care having come to so terrible an end. I try to console myself and reconcile him with his life, but things are so difficult. There are so many men to see. Poor fellow, to think of him out there alone in the bog, with no one to help him." Chapter 6. The Passing of Paul Pennyfeather. A few days later, Paul was summoned to the governor's room. "I have an order here from the Home Secretary granting leave for you to go into a private nursing home for the removal of your appendix. You will start under escort in plain clothes this morning." "But, sir," said Paul, "I don't want to have my appendix removed. In fact, it was done years ago when I was still at school." "Nonsense," said the governor. "I have got an order here from the Home Secretary, especially requiring that it should be done. Officer, take this man away and give him clothes for the journey." Paul was led away. The clothes in which he had been tried had been sent with him from Blackstone. The warder took them out of the locker, unfolded them, and handed them to Paul. "Shoes, socks, trousers, waistcoat, coat, shirt, collar, tie, and hat," he said. "Will you sign for them?" "The jewellery stays here." He collected his watch, links, tie-pin, note-case, and other odds and ends that had been in Paul's pockets and put them back into the locker. "Can't do anything about your hair," said the warder, "but you are allowed to shave." Half an hour later, Paul emerged from his cell looking for all the world like a normal, civilized man, such as you might see daily in any tube railway. "Feels funny, don't it?" said the warder who let him out. "Here's your escort." Another normal, civilized man, such as you might see in any tube-way, confronted Paul. "Time we started, if you're quite ready," he said. Robbed of their uniforms, it seemed natural that they should treat each other with normal considerations. Paul thought he detected a certain deference in the man's tone. "It's very odd," said Paul, in the van that took them to the station. "It's no good arguing with the governor, but he's made some ridiculous mistake. I've had my appendix out already." "Not half," said the warder with a wink. "But don't go talking about it so loud. The driver's not in on this." A first-class carriage had been reserved for them in the train as they drew out of Egdon station. The warder said, "Well, that's the last you'll see of this old place for some time. Solemn thought, death, ain't it?" And he gave another shattering wink. They had lunch in their carriage, Paul feeling a little too shy of his closely cropped hair to venture hatless into the restaurant car. After lunch, they smoked cigars. The warder paid from a fat note case. "Oh, I nearly forgot," he said. "Here's your will for you to sign in case anything should happen." He produced a long blue paper and handed it to Paul. The last will and testament of Paul Pennyfeather was handsomely engraved at the top. Below it was stated, with the usual legal paraphrases, that he left all possessions to Margot Beast Chetwynd. 2 witnesses had already signed below the vacant space. "I'm sure this is all very irregular," said Paul, signing. "I wish you'd tell me what all this means." "I don't know nothing," said the warder. "Young gentleman, give me the will." "What young gentleman? How should I know?" said the warder. "The young gentleman what's arranged everything. Very sensible to make a will. You never know with an operation what may happen, do you? I had an aunt died having gallstones taken out. She hadn't made a will. Very awkward it was. Her not being married properly, you see. Fine, healthy woman, too. To look at her. Don't you get worried, Mr. Pennyfeather. Everything will be done strictly according to the regulations." "Where are we going? At least you must know that." For an answer, the warder took out a printed card from his pocket. "Cliff Place, Worthing," he read. "High-class nursing and private sanatorium. Electrical thermal treatment under medical supervision. Augustus Fagin, M.D., proprietor. Approved by the Home Secretary," said the warder. "Nothing to complain of." Late in the afternoon, a car was waiting to take them to Cliff Place. "This ends my responsibility," said the warder. "From now on, the doctor's in charge." Like all Dr. Fagin's enterprises, Cliff Place was conceived on a large scale. The house stood alone on the seashore, some miles from the town, was approached by a long drive. In detail, however, it showed some signs of neglect. The veranda was deep in driven leaves. 2 of the windows were broken. Paul's escort rang the bell at the front door, and the dingy, dressed as a nurse, opened it to them. "The servants have all gone," she said. "I suppose this is the appendicitis case. Come in." She showed no signs of recognizing Paul as she led him up the stairs. "This is your room. The Home Office regulations insisted that it should be on an upper story with barred windows. We've had to put the bars in specially. They will be charged for it in the bill. The surgeon will be here in a few moments." As she went out, she locked the door. Paul sat on the bed and waited. Below his window, the sea beat on the shingle. A small steam yacht lay at anchor some distance out to sea. The grey horizon faded indistinctly into the grey sky. Presently, steps approached, and his door opened. In came Dr. Fagin, Sir Alistair Digby Vane Trumpington, and an elderly little man with a drooping red moustache, evidently the worse for wear, for drink. Sorry we're late, said Sir Alister, but I've had an awful day with this man trying to keep him sober. He gave me the slip just as we were starting. I was afraid at first that he would be too tight to be moved, but I think he can just carry on. Have you got the papers made out? No one paid much attention to Paul. Here they are, said Dr. Fagin. This is a statement you are to forward to the Home Secretary and a duplicate for the governor of the prison. Shall I read them to you? It's all right, said the surgeon. They merely state that you operated on the patient for appendicitis and he died under the anaesthetic without regaining consciousness. Poor old chap, said the surgeon. Poor little girl. And 2 tears of sympathy welled up in his eyes. I dare say the world had been very hard on her. It's a hard world for women. That's all right, said Sir Alister. Don't you worry. You did all that was humanly possible. That's the truth, said the surgeon, and I don't care who knows it. This is the ordinary certificate of death, said Dr. Fagin. Would you be so good as to sign it there? Oh, death, where is thy sting-a-ling-ling? Said the surgeon, and with these words and a laboured effort of the pen, he terminated the legal life of Paul Pennyfeather. Splendid, said Sir Alister. Now, here's your money. If I were you, I should run off and have a drink while the pubs are still open. Do you know, I think I will, said the surgeon, and left the sanatorium. There was a hush for nearly a minute after he had left the room. In the presence of death, even in its coldest and most legal form, seemed to cause an air of solemnity. It was broken by the arrival of Flossie, splendidly attired in magenta and green. I hear you all are, she said with genuine delight. And Mr. Pennyfeather, too, to be sure. Quite a little party. She had said the same thing. The word party seemed to strike a responsive note in Dr. Fagin. Let's go down to supper, he said. I'm sure we will all have a great deal to be thankful for. After supper, Dr. Fagin made a little speech. I think this an important evening for most of us, he said. Most of all for my dear friend and sometime colleague Paul Pennyfeather, in whose death tonight we are all to some extent participants. For myself, as well as for him, it is the beginning of a new phase of life. Frankly, this nursing home has not been a success. The time must come to every man when he begins to doubt his vocation. You may think me almost an old man, but I do not feel too old to start light-heartedly on a new manner of life. This evening's events have made this possible for me. I think, he said, glancing at his 2 daughters, that it is time I was alone. But this is not the hour to review the plans for my future. When you get to my age, if you have been at all observant of the people you have met and the accidents which have happened to you, you cannot help being struck with an amazing cohesiveness of events. How promiscuously we who are here this evening have been thrown together. How enduring and endearing the memories from that now onwards will unite us. I think we should toast a drink to Fortune, a much maligned lady. Once before, Paul had drunk the same toast. This time, there was no calamity. They drank silently, and Alister rose from the table. It's time Paul and I were going, he said. They walked out down the beach together. A boat was waiting to him. That's Margot's yacht, said Alister. It's to take you to her house in Corfu, until you've decided about things. Goodbye, and good luck. Aren't you coming any further? Said Paul. No, I've got to drive back to King's Thursday. Margot will be anxious to know how things have got off. Paul got into the boat and was rowed away. Sir Alister, like Sir Bedivere, watched him out of sight. Chapter 7. Resurrection. 2 minutes later, Paul was sat on the veranda of Margot's villa, with his evening aperitif before him, watching the sunset on the Albanian hills across the water change, with the crude brilliance of a German picture postcard from green to violet. He looked at his watch, which had that morning arrived from England. It was 6:30. Below him in the harbour, a ship had come in from Greece and was unloading her cargo. The little boats hung around her like flies, plying their trade of olive wood, souvenirs, and forged francs. There were 2 hours before dinner. Paul rose and descended the arcaded street into the square, drawing his scarf tight about his throat. The evenings began to get cold about this time. It was odd being dead. That morning Margot had sent him a bunch of press cuttings about himself. Most of them headed, "Wedding Sensation Echo," or "Death of Society Bridegroom Convict." With them were his tie-pin and the rest of his possessions. It had been sent to her from Egdon. He felt the need of the bustle of cafes and the quayside to convince him fully of his existence. He stopped at a stall and bought some Turkish delight. It was odd being dead. Suddenly he was aware of a familiar figure approaching him across the square. "Hello," said Paul. "Hello," said Otto Silenus. He was carrying on his shoulder a shapeless knapsack of canvas. "Why don't you give that to one of the boys? They'll take it for a few drachma." "I have no money. Will you pay him?" "Yes." "All right, then that will be best. I suppose you're staying with Margot?" "I'm staying at her house. She's in England." "That's a pity. I hoped I should find her here. Still, I will stay for a little, I think. Will there be room for me?" "I suppose so. I'm here all alone." "I've changed my mind. I think after all I will marry Margot." "I'm afraid it's too late." "Too late?" "Yes, she married someone else." "I never thought of that." "Oh, well, it doesn't really matter. Whom did she marry? That sensible Maltravers?" "Yes. He's changed his name now. He's called Viscount Metroland." "What a funny name." They walked up the hill together. "I've just been to Greece to see the buildings there," said Professor Silenus. "Did you like them?" "They are unspeakably ugly, but there were some nice goats." "I thought they sent you to prison." "They did, yes, but I got out." "Yes, you must have, I suppose." "Was it nice?" "Not terribly." "Funny, I thought it would suit you so well. You never can tell with people, can you?" "What's going to suit them?" Margot's servants did not seem surprised at the arrival of another guest. "Well, I think I shall stay here a long time," said Professor Silenus after dinner. "I have no money left. Are you going soon?" "Yes, I am going back to Oxford to learn theology again." "Yes, that will be a good thing. You used to not have a moustache, used you?" he asked after a time. "No," said Paul. "I'm just growing one now. I don't want people to recognize me when I go back to England." "I think it's uglier," said Professor Silenus. "Well, I must go to bed." "Have you slept any better lately?" "Twice since I saw you. It's about my average. Good night." 10 minutes later he came back out onto the terrace wearing silk pyjamas and tattered old canvas dressing gown. "Can you lend me a nail file?" he asked. "Oh, there's one on my dressing table." "Thank you." But he didn't move. Instead, he walked to the parapet and leant out, looking across the sea. "It's a good thing for you to be a clergyman," he said at last. "People get ideas about a thing they call life. It sets them all wrong. I think it's the poets that are responsible chiefly. Shall I tell you about life?" "Oh, yes, do," said Paul politely. "Well, it's like the big wheel at Luna Park. Have you seen the big wheel?" "No, I'm afraid not. You pay 5 francs and you go into a room with tiers of seats all around, and in the centre of the floor is made a great disc of polished wood that revolves quickly. At first you sit down and watch the others. They're all trying to sit in the wheel, and then they keep getting flung off, and that makes them laugh. And you laugh too. It's great fun." "I don't think that sounds very much like life," said Paul rather sadly. "Oh, but it is, though. You see, the nearer you can get to the hub of the wheel, the slower it is moving, and the easier it is to stay on. There's generally someone at the centre who stands up and sometimes does a sort of dance. Often he's paid by the management, though, or at any rate he's allowed in free. Of course, at the very centre there's a point completely at rest. If one could only find it. I'm not sure I'm very near that point myself. Of course, the professional men get in the way. Lots of people just enjoy scrambling on and being whisked off and scrambling on again. They all shriek and giggle. Then there are others, like Margot, who sit as far out as they can and hold on for dear life and enjoy that. But the whole point about the wheel is that you needn't get on at all, if you don't want to. People get hold of ideas about life, and that makes them think that they've got to join the game. Even if they don't enjoy it, it doesn't suit everyone. People don't see that when they say life. They mean two different things. They can mean simply existence, with its physiological implications of growth and organic change. They can't escape that, even by death. But because that's inevitable, they think the other idea of life is too. The scrambling and excitement and the bumps and the effort to get into the middle. And it's when we do get to the middle, it's just as if we've never started. It's so odd. Now, you're a person who was clearly meant to stay in the seats and sit still. And if you get bored, watch the others. Somehow, you got onto the wheel, and you got thrown off, again at once with a hard bump. It's all right for Margot, who can cling on, and for me at the centre, but you're static. Instead of this absurd division into sexes, they ought to class people as static and dynamic. There's a real distinction for you. Though I can't tell you how it comes. I think we're probably two quite different species spiritually. I used that idea of the wheel in a cinema film once. I think it rather sounds like it. Don't you? What was it I came back for? A nail file? Oh, yes, of course. I know no more utterly boring and futile occupation than generalizing about life. Did you take in what I was saying? Yes, I think so. I think I shall have my meals alone in future. Will you tell the servants? Makes me feel quite ill to talk so much. Good night. Oh, good night, said Paul. Some months later, Paul returned to Scone College, after the absence of little more than a year. His death, though, depriving him of his certificates, had left him his knowledge. He sat successfully for Smalls and matriculation, and entered his old college once more, wearing a commoner's gown and a heavy cavalry moustache. This and his natural diffidence formed a complete disguise. Nobody recognized him. After much doubt and deliberation, he retained the name of Pennyfeather, explaining to the chaplain that he had believed he had a distant cousin at Scone a short time ago. Oh, he came to a very sad end, said the chaplain, a wild young man. He was a very distant cousin, said Paul hastily. Yes, I'm sure he was. There's no resemblance between you. He was a thoroughly degenerate type, I'm afraid. Paul's scout also remembered the name. There used to be another Mr. Pennyfeather on this staircase once, he said. A very queer gentleman indeed. Would you believe it, sir? He used to take off all his clothes and go out and dance in the quad at night. Nice quiet gentleman, too, he was, except for his dancing. He must have been a little queer in the head, I suppose. I don't know what became of him. They say he died in prison. Then he proceeded to tell Paul about an Annamese student who had attempted to buy one of the senior tutor's daughters. On the second Sunday of term, the chaplain asked Paul to breakfast. It's a sad thing, he said. The way that the varsity breakfast, brekker, we used to call it in my day, is dying out. People haven't the time for it. Always off to lectures at 9 o'clock, except on Sundays. Have another kidney, won't you? There was another Don present called Mr. Sniggs, who addressed the chaplain rather superciliously, Paul thought, as Padre. There was also an undergraduate from another college, a theological student called Stubbs, a grave young man with a quiet voice and with carefully formed opinions. He had a little argument with Mr. Sniggs about the plans for rebuilding the Bodleian. Paul supported him. Next day, Paul found Stubbs' card at his table in the corner, turned up. Paul went to Hartford to call on Stubbs, but found him out. He left his card. The corner turned up. 2 days later, a little note came from Hartford. Dear Pennyfeather, I wonder if you care to come to tea next Tuesday to meet the College Secretary of the League of Nations Union and the chaplain of the Oxford prison. It would be so nice if you could. Paul went and ate honey buns and anchovy toast. He liked the ugly, subdued little college, and he liked Stubbs. As term went on, Paul and Stubbs took to going for walks together, over Mesopotamia to Old Marston and Beckley. One afternoon, quite light-heartedly as the fresh weather on their long walks and their tea, Stubbs signed, Randall Cantor in the Visitors Book. Paul rejoined the League of Nations Union and the OSCU. On one occasion, he and Stubbs and some other friends went to the prison to visit criminals there and sing part songs to them. It opens the mind, said Stubbs, to see all sides of life, how those unfortunate men appreciated our singing. One day, in Blackwell's bookshop, Paul found a stout volume, which the assistant told him was rapidly becoming a bestseller. It was called Mother Wales by Augustus Fagan. Paul bought the book and took it back with him. Stubbs had already read it. Most illuminating, he said. The hospital statistics are terrible. Do you think it would be a good idea to organize a joint debate with Jesus on the subject? The book was dedicated to my wife, a wedding present. It was eloquently written. When he had read it, Paul put it on the shelf next to the Dean's Stanley's Eastern Church. One other incident recalled momentarily Paul's past life. One day, at the beginning of his second year, Paul and Stubbs were bicycling down the High from one lecture to another. They nearly ran into an open Rolls-Royce that swung out of Oriole Street at a dangerous speed. In the back, a heavy fur rug over his knees, sat Philbrick. He turned round as he passed and waved a gloved hand to Paul over the hood. "Hello," he said. "Hello, how are you? Come and look me up one day. I'm living near the river, Skindles." Then the car disappeared down the high street. Paul went on to his lecture. "Who was your opulent friend?" asked Stubbs, rather impressed. "Arnold Bennett," said Paul. "Thought I knew his face," said Stubbs. Then the lecturer came in, arranged his papers, and began a lucid exposition on the heresies of the 2nd century. There was a bishop in Bithynia, Paul learned, who had denied the divinity of Christ, the immorality of the soul, the existence of good, the legality of marriage, and the validity of the sacraments of extreme unction. How right they had been to condemn him. It was Paul's 3rd year of uneventful residence at Scone. He finished his cocoa, knocked out his pipe, and rose to go. "I must be off to my digs," he said. "You're lucky staying in college. It's a long ride back to Walton Street on a night like this." "Do you want to take the Von Hugel?" asked Paul. "No, not tonight. May I leave it till Tuesday?" Stubbs picked up his scholar's gown and wrapped it around his shoulders. "That was an interesting paper tonight about the Polish plebiscites." "Yes, wasn't it?" said Paul. Outside there was a confusing roaring and breaking of glass. "The Bollinger seemed to be enjoying themselves," said Paul. "Whose rooms are they in this time?" "Past masters, I think. The young man seems to be going a bit fast for his age." "Well, I hope he enjoys it," said Paul. "Good night." "Good night, Paul," said Stubbs. Paul put the chocolate biscuits back in the cupboard, refilled his pipe, and settled down in his chairs. Presently he heard footsteps and a knock at his door. "Come in," he said, looking round. Paul Pastmaster came into the room. He was dressed in the bottle green and white evening coat of the Bollinger Club. His face was flushed and his hair dark, slightly disordered. "May I come in?" "Yes, do. Have you got a drink?" "You seem to have had a good many already." "I've had the boller in my rooms, noisy lot. Oh, hell, I must have a drink." "There's some whiskey in the cupboard. You're drinking rather a lot these days, aren't you, Peter?" Peter said nothing, but helped himself to some whiskey and soda. "Feeling a bit ill," he said. Then after a pause, "Paul, why have you been cutting me all this time?" "I don't know. I didn't think there was much to be gained by our knowing each other." "Not angry about anything?" "No, why should I be?" "Oh, I don't know." Peter turned his glass in his hand, staring at it intently. "I've been rather angry with you, you know." "Why?" "Oh, I don't know. About Margot and the man, Maltravers, and everything." "I don't think I was much to blame." "No, I suppose not. You were only part of it all." "How's Margot?" "She's all right. Margot Metroland." "Mind if I take another drink?" "I suppose not." "Viscountess Metroland," said Peter. "What a name. What a man. Still, she's got Alistair all the same. Metroland doesn't mind. He's got what he wanted. I don't see much of them, really." "What do you do all the time, Paul?" I'm going to be ordained soon. Wish I didn't feel so damned ill. What were we saying? Oh, yes, about Metroland. You know, Paul, I think it was a mistake you ever got mixed up with us, don't you? We're different somehow. Don't quite know how. Don't think that's rude, do you, Paul? No, I know exactly what you mean. You're dynamic and I'm static. Is that it? Expect you're right. Funny thing you used to teach me once, do you remember? Clanabba, Latin sentences, Cominius and Quin, and the organ, do you remember? Yes, I remember, said Paul. Funny how things happen. You used to teach me the organ, do you remember? Yes, I remember. And then Margot Metroland wanted to marry you, do you remember? Yes, said Paul. And then you went to prison, and Alistair, that's Margot Metroland's young man, and Metroland, that's her husband, got you out. Do you remember? Yes, said Paul, I remember. And here we are, talking to one another like this up here, after all that. Funny, isn't it? Yes, it is rather. Paul, do you remember a thing you once said at the Ritz? Alistair was there. That's Margot Metroland's young man, you know. Do you remember? I was rather tight then, too. You said, Fortune is a much maligned lady. Do you remember that? Yes, said Paul. I remember. Good old Paul, I knew you would. Let's drink to that now, shall we? How did it go? Damn, I've forgotten it. Never mind. I wish I didn't feel so ill. You drink too much, Peter. Oh, damn, what else is there to do? You're going to be a clergyman, Paul? Yes. Damn funny that, you know. You ought never to have got mixed up with me at Metroland. May I have another drink? Time you went to bed, Peter, don't you think? Yes, I suppose it is. Didn't mind me coming in, did you? After all, you used to teach me the organ, do you remember? Thanks for the whiskey. So Peter went out, and Paul settled down again to his chair. So the ascetic Ebonites used to turn towards Jerusalem when they prayed. Paul made a note of it. Quite right to suppress them. Then he turned out the light and went into his bedroom to sleep. Well, what a marvellous book. I think we shall have an Agatha Christie next. Thank you if you saw this. Thank you if you joined me. Good night.